George, I wanted to bring this to you today because I want to be an entrepreneur and I want to be able to become self-sufficient off of my own company. And that's my ultimate goal. And then another one of my goals on a personal level is to be able to buy a house. But just looking at housing prices, I'm starting to get nervous as to how long is it going to take me to reach this goal.
Honestly, everything I'm reading for Gen Z and younger millennials is pretty discouraging.
Yeah, I just came across a Buzzfeed article today where they're describing how it's become extraordinarily more difficult to buy a house.
I'm about how do we make it work in 2023? Welcome to the Live Truly Free podcast. All right. So, guys, we're going to break this down. Yeah, we're going to talk a little numbers because that's what business savvy is. AJ, let me summarize what I think I'm hearing in the BuzzFeed article you're quoting from is that essentially, and there's some fallacies, I think. They're saying the average income in the mid 80s or 1980s, who knows when, was $30,000. And today, 40 years later, they're saying it's only $50,000. I did a back calculation on the inflation rate of $50,000 would be the equivalent in mid 1980 dollars of $17,000. Okay. And they actually quote in this article a census number of 21. So why 21,000? So why they picked 30, who knows? It works for their math.
Yeah. But the point still remains, it was higher than what the down payment would be expected to be.
Well, again, then you get into the valuation of houses. So we'll go there in just a second. Here's the point is that, and I would agree with this, is that in the mid 80s, the inflation rate or the increase in income has not kept pace with the increase in the value of housing. No one's going to argue with that. Yeah. But here's the other point. We're not living in the mid 80s. We're living in 2023. And I'm about how do we make it work in 2023? I would argue that it was just as challenging to the generation in the 80s trying to buy a house as it is in 2023. What I would say is the challenges to the future homeowner in 1980 were not much different than in 2023. It's a challenge, and challenges require strategy.
When you pose it that way, it makes sense. It's a challenge to buy a house. And I'm not doubting that it was a challenge in 1980. I just think it's more challenging now. But like you said, that just requires more creative strategies because everyone in 1980 probably did the same thing as what we're doing now is when you get out of college, when you're starting your career, you rent first. And that's what I'm doing. And I know all of my friends are renting right now. You rent and then eventually you try to save enough money so that you could buy and own the house that you're living in.
So AJ, I can totally relate to you because like you, I was just starting out and I did not want to rent. So guys, go see our episode on rent versus buy. And you're going to understand George's opinion on this. I hate renting. And so the thought of, because I'm such a financial guy, that I knew, okay, what I'm paying in rent, I could be using it to build value in a house. And I got super creative. I had no money. I had in other words, no money for a down payment or anything like that. And I came up with an idea to buy a duplex. And my plan was, so I was single at the time. And so my plan was, okay, yeah, duplex has two sides. So I would rent out the other side. And then I would take my side, split it in half and have a roommate and rent. So I had 3/4 of it rented out to help me make my monthly payment.
Got it. So you owned all of it, but you're only paying for 1/4 of it. But the downside to that is you have to share it with 2 other people.
Well, the duplex is you're not really sharing. The problem is you have a renter. So if the plumbing goes out or there's a problem, you live right next door. So he knows right where the landlord is. And so that was a whole experience. I learned a lot. And it was okay. It really was.
It's a smart strategy when you think about it. I'm just like running numbers in my head. I'm like, so you have 2/3 of the people living in the duplex paying for 3/4 of the duplex.
Right.
Which is a great opportunity for you.
Yeah. So I'm building principal in the building using their money. That's how I got my payment down to something I could afford.
Yeah, my question was going to be how nice is the duplex?
Oh, yeah. So it was really nice. It was really nice. It was a classic. It was built like in the 30s. Um, and it was in this neighborhood that was coming back. If I could have hung out there another 10 years, I could have sold it for like 10 times what I paid for it. Because I knew that area was going to come back, but we ended up moving, and I got married and had a kid, and we just didn't fit. That was the problem. And in fact, my son, the joke was he didn't learn to walk until we actually moved, because he could hold on to everything because there was very little space to walk in the place. So he could just prop himself up. There was so much furniture. But the thing is that, and honestly, if we could have held on to the property and we just financially couldn't, it would have been a rainfall of money. So yeah, no, it was the location. It wasn't the location you would want to be for a school district to raise your children. It wasn't that,
Yeah.
but it's now one of the hottest spots in the town.
Okay, so going back to, your initial decision to buy the duplex, when you were going through that process, how did you know what you could afford?
Okay, we've kind of gotten things a little out of order here. So let's break this down and use my strategic process that I've got in the Next Level Navigator. And that's where you've got an obstacle or a challenge, and you want to start strategizing around it. That's how I actually came up with the strategy to do a duplex. And then once I had my strategy, I went and I scoured the town for duplexes to find something that was of in the strategy range that I could afford and all of that. So you've got to begin this case. If you're interested in getting a house, AJ, or let's be a little broader with that. Let's just say into a piece of property. Okay.
Yes, I would like to own a piece of property.
Right. And I want to live on the property. And, so it may be a multiplex or something, but, how do I get into something? Because I want to start building equity. That was actually my plan, was to build equity. And I kind of didn't care how I did it. I just didn't want to be paying rent every single month and not get any return on it. So you got to know your numbers. I think that's the business savvy approach to this one. You have to start with your numbers.
And so the number you're starting at, would that be the rent payment? So when you were going through it, were you like, I could pay this for rent,
Right.
and then I'm going to find an equivalent housing payment that I can afford, based on that rent payment I thought I could afford?
Right. Guys, out there's tons of mortgage calculators and all that kind of stuff. AJ and I, being financial whizzes, have put together something I've never seen out there, honestly. And we're going to make it available as a free download to this podcast for you guys. And it's the house payment calculator. Okay. And I'm going to share my screen. We will not stay on this for very long. So this is the house payment calculator, and the yellow boxes are all inputs. And here's where it goes. The bottom line, and let's start with the bottom line, is the difference down here. The difference between your current rent. So let's say you're paying $2,000 a month in rent. And I want to see what it would take. What could I afford to get into a monthly payment of about $2,000? Okay. So you've got your mortgage payment, which is your principal and interest. And then you've got property taxes. Now in Texas, I'm using a pretty high rate because we pay a lot in property taxes. So that's an input. You can change it to whatever percentage is right. And it varies by the way, in Texas, it varies from county to county. And then you've got to pay for home insurance. Now, a lot of times your mortgage company will bundle all that together. Up above, we've got a 10% down payment. We've got, which is an input. You could go with if you could get a lower payment, or you have to make a higher payment. your rate, which current rates are about 7.2%, and then the length of the mortgage. So I would suggest a 30-year mortgage because we're just trying to get into a piece of property. And all the interest is tax deductible if you itemize your deductions. Okay. What I did here was I'm back into the house price. So this calculates out to a $235,000 house price. And that would give me a monthly total payment of $1,994. And if I'm paying rent, I'm $6 to the good. All right. But I also have to come up with a $23,500 down payment. If I go to the Texas average of 300,000, or it's actually 289, let's use that. I'm going to be $452 over my current rent payment. That still might work, I might still be able to do that. So this calculator is, you can play around with your numbers. You can change the different variables. You can see what it takes for you. You can also change, I should make that a highlight. You can change the rent payment. So it'll, to whatever you're paying, and you can start to model out and see what will work for you. So AJ, I didn't have something that, well, I probably did have something that sophisticated. I don't really remember, but, but can you see, with all of that knowledge, then I go, in my case, like with the duplex, I go, okay, so if the payment, I could change that rent. Let's say I could only afford $1,000. Okay. Then I go, if I've got a duplex, I could rent the other side out and the going rates are $1,500. So I could add, extra income because I'm going to be generating income off of my property.
The only key is then being able to find a house you're happy with at that price range. But I get it's a starter home as well. So it's not my dream home. It's not going to be my final home. It's just the first place that I'm able to build equity into. And that does work. I just know where I live in a city that's a real estate bubble right now.
Right.
So finding a house for $289,000 is probably unheard of at this point.
Okay. Right. So what you have to do is you got to make some decisions. And this is all in the strategic thinking part of it. And it's like, one strategy would be, I move outside of the bubble. And I know if you move north of that bubble, you could find a house in a price range you could afford.
Well, that would really suck.
Why? Why would that suck?
Because there's a reason it's becoming a bubble. People want to live in this city. It's fun. It's cool. There's a lot to do around here. All the amenities of the city. I want to be able to enjoy those and not have to drive an hour or 45 minutes to get to them.
Right. So this is perfect. This is all about the strategy, and it's figuring out, okay, then maybe I'm not ready to buy on a couple of levels. I don't have the salary that would generate, or I'm not generating the kind of income, or I really want to have fun in the bubble. Okay. Makes sense. That's fine. Have fun. But at some point you go, I really want a house, and if but there's something you can be doing. If you know your numbers, there's a number you haven't asked me about. How did I come up with the down payment for the duplex?
How did you come up with it?
That's what family's for. I borrowed the money on like a 5-year, no interest kind of a thing from my dad. And I built that so I was making him payment to him. It was a small payment, but every month I was making a little payment to him. I built that into my model. So what I ended up doing, and here's the whole thing to the starter home thing. Here's why you live in a dump, okay? And you're young. You can afford to live in a dump, and you can fix the dump up, and it's a lot of fun to fix it up. And you've got energy and all that kind of stuff because you're building value. And here's what you're really building. You're building the down payment for your next house. You're not buying this house to live in for the rest of your life. You're buying this house. That's why it's called a starter home. Okay. I'm starting a home, but it's not the one we're going to live in. It's the one that's going to get me into the house I want to live in. So I may have to move out of the bubble, build up and I'll move back in the bubble. Or I may discover living in the bubble sucks. I'd rather just visit on the weekends. I mean, perspectives change. What you need to know is like, okay, I've scoured the area. I kind of have my strategy, and I need to build a 20 grand cushion for a 10% down payment, or I need to build a 40 grand cushion for a down payment. But I can be building the down payment by living in the bubble and paying rent.
So it comes down to trade-offs, really, because at the end of the day, like what we started this conversation is a challenge. I want to be able to own a
AJ, you just described life. Life
yeah.
is a series of trade-offs.
Yes,
we can't
challenges.
have everything.
Yes.
Just saying life has choices.
Yeah. But so if I want this goal to be able to own a house in this bubble that I live in now, I might have to accept that the strategy is going to be, okay, I have to move out of the bubble to build equity and build up a home that could then afford me the down payment to move back into it. That would be like the most likely strategy. So it's like sacrifice a few years living outside of it, so that way I can have the permanent residence here
I have
time.
I have friends who live in your bubble. And years ago, they bought a house, and they took one part of the house and turned it into a separate unit altogether, separate entrance. It was a small, like 800 square feet or something, but kitchen, the whole bit, and rented it out. They had no money. These people were poor. They had no money. And there's tons of creative ways, especially entrepreneurs. We think differently. We think about opportunities that other people don't think about. That was very creative. And so the renter would pay, very, very similar to my situation. Mine was an actual duplex. They just converted their house. It had a floor plan that worked for that. And they bought it because of that reason. And they did the work themselves. So years ago, we had these friends, and they had just bought this new house, and it was in a really nice neighborhood and well above the median house price. Okay. Invited us over. They invited several friends over. They were kind of, housewarming party thing. We got there. And I'll never forget. You walk in and the marble entrance and all this stuff. And I look over there's a, like, would be a living room or a dining room. There's no furniture in it. So I go to another room and there's no furniture. And we walked through the kitchen, and then they had this huge family living room area, and there's a sofa and a TV. There's no furniture in it.
So it looks like a college kid's first apartment.
They take us upstairs. It's like 4 bedrooms, all these bathrooms. The bedrooms are all empty except the master bedroom. They don't have kids yet. And I remember going home, my wife and I, we were talking about this, and it was like, I think they should have bought a less expensive house so they could put something in it. They spent all their money on the house, and it would be years before they got caught up. These were friends we knew for a while. So look, I mean, that's what they wanted. They wanted to be in that kind of neighborhood and that kind of house, and nobody on the outside knew it was empty inside.
So they went with the exact opposite strategy of what we were just talking about. They said their starter home is going to be that final home, and I don't care what's in the home. We have it.
Yeah. I mean, so look, I'm not being critical. I'm just saying that's a different way to do it. It's not the way I would have done it. Kind of need to understand something about the house. Purchasing a home that you're going to live in is not an investment. It's really a scheme to live rent-free, mostly rent-free. You're going to have upkeep. You're going to have repair and upkeep. We didn't put that into our model. So there's all other kinds of expenses that you would have that normally, someone's got to cut the grass, The apartment, nobody, you don't worry about that. It's built into the rate. So consider this like rent free. In other words, at the end of the day, toward the end of your life, let's say, you've built up equity in a house and there's been price appreciation to the house, which covers. So, in other words, if you sold the house, you'd get back all the rent money you would have ever paid if you had just been a renter your whole life. If you think about a house that way, you will win. Because that's the way I'm thinking about it. Honestly, eventually, I'll sell this house and make a killing and move in with AJ and live rent free.
Except I heard AJ's a pretty tough landlord to live with. So,
Look, just give me a spot in the garage. I won't need much. But anyhow, this is the idea that could get you into a house, and in an entrepreneurial way, in a business savvy way. So for more on this topic, check out this video right here. I know you're going to love it because we dig in deep into, do I pay as I go or do I buy? And until next time, may you live truly free.